Hello, and welcome to the Nostalgia Podcast.
A podcast where we discuss the retelling or continuation of pop culture favorites as seen through a queer and feminist lens.
My name is Eric Lefebvre.
And my name is Jessica Tercero.
And this week, we watched The Incredibles.
Incredibly...
The Incredibly Incredibles. The Incredulasables.
I know so many people love this movie. Even when this first came out, I was like, it was okay. That was my initial response. Back when this came out in 2004, I was like, all right, fine, it's a thing. And now, having watched it as an adult, I'm just like, ugh, okay, fucking beautiful. Beautiful. Everything is so gorgeous. I love the design. I love the colors. I love the lines. I love the aesthetic. It's just so visually pleasing.
Oh, yeah.
But such fucking garbage.
It's bad. I mean, when I first watched it... It's way worse
than y'all remember.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this was so great. I mean, because obviously, I'm a male person, so I'm, identifying with a very male-centric story, at least the first one. And I was just like, oh my God, wow, that was so great, and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, again, I was the second one.
Oh, yeah, it's a white straight guy it's a white straight guy writing about feminism and being like, am I right, ladies? And you're like, what are you talking about?
I know. Just got to go back to the good old days.
Oh my God, yeah. Oh, there's a lot there. But
so you liked it at first, when you first watched it.
I didn't like it. I loved The Incredibles. I thought The Incredibles was so good. I was just like, it's so fun. I remember the intro short film.
Did you gotta have it?
I had to have it. I was just so here for it. To some degree, I still am, and to some degree, I will still probably rewatch these movies because I've seen The Incredibles so many times. I've seen The Incredibles 2, I think, 3 times now, but I won't look at it the same. Especially looking at it with a critical eye, it changed everything about the movie for me. In every capacity, in every respect,
Same.
Everything I thought about it, I no longer think about it.
Yeah, 1,000%. And it's weird too because sometimes when you're going back and watching these things, especially if you love something or if these certain parts that you really liked or thought were whatever, going back and watching it, you want to get caught up in that. And so sometimes with these films, I had to again, I was so oh, this aesthetic, this is so pretty, and then I had to be no, you're not just looking at this, you're trying to analyze the story and analyze so I have to remind myself sometimes watching these things that no, you're watching this with a purpose, and you know, because so much of it too is the nostalgia factor and all of that. I mean, this whole fucking movie is nostalgia, right?
It's so funny that we're doing we do a podcast about nostalgia, but if anything is nostalgic, it's fucking Brad Bird's obsession with the white supremacy of the 60s and 70s in white America where white men were in charge. Go fuck yourself, Brad Bird.
Go fuck yourself.
What an asshole.
This guy wrote the script or whatever 5 years before he pitched it, all this other stuff. And something just to make you cringe a little bit. It's based on a true story without all the superhero stuff of his life. So he is Mr. Incredible. So just the family dynamic, the language, because we see this through Mr. Incredible's eyes 90% of the time, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which makes so much sense now. When I read that, I was like, wow, yeah, that's why this is so gross. He's writing it from his perspective, from his real life experiences and things like that. So, men like to see themselves in everything that they do, and Incredibles is no different.
Yep. And it's so emblematic of how selfish, self-centered, fully lacking compassion, lacking empathy, lacking any sort of remorse or understanding for other people's life or existence, or understanding his own sort of toxic traits that he's just sort of espousing on his family. That fully tracks, because fuck him and fuck Mr. Incredible so much. And God damn it, Dash sucks too because of Mr. Incredible.
All right, so does Jack too.
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
It took me, I'm not shitting you, probably 4 to 6 hours to get through Incredibles 2 because I was like, it was, yeah. So I have a lot to say too. And also, these movies don't know what the fuck they're trying to say.
No, they don't. They have no directive.
They don't know what they want, what they really, really want. So
let's
need
tell
to figure
them what
that
they
out.
want, what they
Let's
really,
tell them
really
what,
want.
Let's tell them what we want.
Well, let's tell them what we want.
That wasn't fucking in these movies.
Yeah, exactly.
In an ambiguous 1970s American city where superhero work has been outlawed, undercover supers, the Parr family, try to blend in. After losing his job, being contacted by the Revive the Supers agency, and in an attempt to relive his glory days, Mr. Incredible goes to some faraway island to destroy some rogue robot.
JK, LOL, it's a trap by Syndrome, a jilted superfan of Mr. Incredible who, in an attempt to seek revenge on his once hero, enacts a plan to give everyone powers so supers will no longer be so super. Helen Parr and their children, Violet and Dash, come to save the day, and, in a big robot battle showdown in the city, the Incredibles, accompanied by a token character of color, destroy the robot and save the day. Also, their house blows up, and being rich and white is how you win, apparently. Hooray!
Hooray!
Yeah, so...
What a mess.
Yeah, what a mess. Where do we start with this? There's so much to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. Let's start with the power selection. They chose these powers for these specific gender roles. Okay, I'm super pissed about gender roles and all this other stuff in this fucking movie. And this is intentional. Like I read it somewhere too. It wasn't just like me being like, oh, is this? But no, it's like their powers are representative of their character, of who they are. So the mom is flexible because she's emotionally flexible and good in any situation and can kind of like handle all of the things, right? The dad, he's just strong. He just punches things and is really hard-headed and a brute. The daughter doesn't, and this is all like, so they think she doesn't want anybody to see her. So her power is literally, and this pissed me off the most, she can go invisible and she puts up walls, like force field walls, so she can't get hurt. And then the boy just runs really fast from everything. Dash is just like, all right, bye. Like, that's his fucking power, is just he's so fast that nobody can catch him, and that's how he gets away from things. And then the baby just doesn't know what the fuck it's doing yet. So that's why he has all, like, I mean, at the very end, he has, like, all of these different things that kind of manifest. But, like, these were just so gendered, but, like, the mom and especially the daughter just fucking pissed me off because, like, they're like, oh, she doesn't want to be seen. That's like all teenage girls or whatever, right? They don't want to be seen. No, it's actually the fucking opposite. We want to be seen. We want to be recognized. We want to be seen as strong. And she wants that dude to give a shit. Her whole motivation is getting a dude to like her, you know? And it's just the putting up the invisible walls so she can't get hurt. Like, come on.
Yeah.
What the fuck are we doing here?
It's wild. It's almost like this was written by a man. Like, the idea
the women are defensive.
Because women are defensive and want to be invisible and are the only flexible. Like, this movie and franchise is so gendered and gross in its way it portrays the binary, because it only exists within the binary. Gender is male or female, and that's it in this world, which is like, fuck off, Brad Bird. Like, fuck off. And so this whole idea that, like, she's the only flexible one and she's flexible, which, like, to her credit, yeah, she was one of the only good characters in this movie where she's like, she needs to leave him. He's bad. He is toxic. He is garbage. She's raising their kid. She is empathetic. She's understanding. She's like, even when she shouldn't be like, hey, I know you're going through something. She's going through everything, but she's the one to go to him and be like, hey, what can I do to help you? When he's just being a brutish fucking baby. Yeah.
And she also, like, the whole movie is making herself small so he can feel big. Yeah. So, like, she hides how badass she is, and she's always busy doing all of these things. And she's so delusional because, like, at the very beginning of the film, she says, I'm at my peak. I'm not going to stop. I'm fucking awesome. I know what I am. I know what I'm doing. And then the next thing we see is, like, her having waited on the fucking altar for Mr. Incredible to show up because he's late again.
Yeah.
Left her at the fucking altar. And so now instead of her walking down the aisle, he's the one walking down the aisle, getting all the, the attention this day that is supposed to, if we're going down that like binary bullshit that like, this universe subscribes to, like that's the day that every woman dreams of and all this other stuff, right?
Yeah.
He couldn't even let her have that. He took that away from her.
Yeah.
So like, okay, yeah, they're illegal now, whatever. So she's now the homemaker. She's the mom. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
But the whole time too, she finds out that her husband's lying to her, and she doesn't like confront him right away or anything. She doesn't like try to talk to him about any of this right away. Like that's not the same person that we saw within the first 5 minutes of this movie, and that just leads me to like this whole fucking movie is about Mr. Incredible. It's about like everybody else has to make themselves small for him.
They do. And like even look at her when she sees Mr. Incredible with Mirage when they get to the island and he's getting saved, and like
oh my god, that's so gross.
He chokes Mirage and she's like, your family survived the plane crash, and then he drops her and hugs her because he's happy his family is alive. That's the moment where Elastigirl comes in the room and sees her, and her instinct is to punch the girl. No, Queen. What? And where's your husband been? What has your husband been doing? Why is this other person the target? Like, why in your writing, Brad Bird, did you make this moment where it's like, oh, he has nothing to do with it? Punch the girl. Like, why? Yeah. What's the fuck? What?
So she punches the girl, and then he like starts pulling her in, and she's like, no, get the fuck away from me. No, whatever. And he's like, but I'm just so happy you're alive. No, like, I'm sorry. No, like, I don't even know if he said he was sorry about everything that he'd done. But like, he's such a fucking gross character. He was like, so like, he's uprooted his family how many times?
Yeah.
We don't have a number, but we know it's multiple because he can't keep his hero dick in his pants. If you're forcing everybody else to live this life, why is it okay that you're the one that breaks it? Why are you just like, oh, well, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. They don't fucking talk in this movie. They don't talk about anything. No. They're just kind of like, oh, okay. I mean, I guess that's, the 60s or whatever. The woman never can bring anything up and can never do anything. And he's just fine, lying to her, going off and doing all this stuff and living the life of luxury while his family still has to be normal. Yeah. Like, he's super fine with that.
So I also like, he is so ego driven and celebrity obsessed. Like, his whole thing is, I want to chase when I was popular. I want to chase when I was a celebrity. I want to chase this feeling of being wanted by the public. He is so driven by his own narcissism and his ego that he doesn't care about anybody else. It's sort of cyclical in that way where he doesn't care about his family, obviously, and he's just ego driven, that whole thing. But even within that, like, this idea of superpower, the idea of power, I feel like is a really good analogy, or is analogous with the sense of privilege, right? Like, once I unlocked that a little bit, it just kind of opened everything, right? So, like, in this world, they are the privileged. They have the power. They're supposed to go into hiding. And, like, Mr. Incredible, he's like, well, we are special and we deserve these things, because he's almost structurally trying to designate themselves like, well, we worked for these things, so we deserve it. It's like, no, you didn't work for power. These powers were given to you. Right. Like, they have nothing to do with work ethic or what you deserve or what others don't deserve. And honestly, I sided the whole time, for the most part, with Syndrome. Obviously, there's a whole thing, because he is like the equity king coming in and being like, I'm going to give everybody superpowers, so you guys aren't any different, so we're all on the same playing field. And they're trying to dismantle that to maintain their status quo of privilege, and specifically of white privilege, right? In the society, they want to make sure that none of the laws get changed and nothing shakes up their standard of living because they're well off and they're white. Why would they want a different life? Why would they want other people to have power? They don't. So in my head this whole time, I'm like, oh, fuck the Incredibles. Like, let him destroy this. Like, make things balanced and fair. It's a conversation about privilege and equity, and Mr. Incredible is the villain of the story. And subsequently, Mrs. Incredible and the kids, like, they are literally fighting to maintain their white privilege. They are the all lives matter, blue lives matter folk in this story. And
for sure, blue lives matter.
You know what I mean? Because in the second one, it gets so worse with the whole cop thing and the body cam. Oh my God.
Yep.
Fucking Christ. So, but even in this one, like the understanding of privilege and of power in this way, when Dash is caught putting the tack on the teacher's desk, the mom being like, hey, we get it. You have power. You can't do that. Fucking stop it. Like, stop. And that's the fact that she won't let him go out for track. It's like, yeah, because he would cheat the whole time. It's unfair. It's unequitable. Like, let him run around the world, but don't compete for it because he's going to win every time. The mom knows that. The mom is trying to instill in her kids that, like, yeah, we're privileged. We have this thing and we're not like other people. So we have to recognize. She's trying to get her kids to recognize their privilege by not letting Dash go out for the team. And what does Mr. Incredible do the whole time? He's like, oh, how fast were you going? You got caught on camera and you didn't get in trouble? Oh my God. It's like, we can break the laws because we're special.
Yes.
It's like white people being like, well, I'm me, so I'm fine. Or like friends of cops or families of cops who can do whatever they want because they have an in. But when some young black kid looks at a cop the wrong way, he's dead, right? Like that kind of bullshit. Mm-hmm. And this story, the heroes that we're looking at, the narrative structurally is trying to reinstill within us, the audience, that this is okay for them. Because Elastigirl, Mrs. Parr, at a certain point, kind of gives up that instilling of, we have a privilege, let's like chill out a little bit. Because she is then written to be the jilted wife who is mad that her husband's lying to her and is downgraded back to just a jealous lover, which is like, really? So you open this conversation because it's very clearly like a conversation about privilege with the mom trying to instill in the kids, Syndrome being like, it's going to be an even playing field, that whole bullshit. They completely dismiss and sort of ignore all of that about 45 minutes into the movie. And then they're just trying to fight the bad guy. But the bad guy is like a socialist who wants everyone to be on the same page and wants good for everybody to some degree.
Yeah. Well, and it's so like, this is how Hollywood always writes socialism or writes people that are like, they're going about it in the wrong way, you know? And I really hated that Syndrome, like he had some really good points and he had some excellent arguments and everything, but the way that he said them and the way that his dialogue and his tone and everything, it was all coming out of vengeance and out of being rejected by his hero. And so it's like, oh, you fucked me over. You didn't look at me. You didn't do this. So it's like, oh, like I'm being selfish. Like his whole character is supposed to be selfish, but he is saying some of these, like all of the things that he's saying, like, you know, and the whole idea too about, oh, well, I'm going to make everybody special, so nobody's special. I want to unpack that because I think that there's so much room for nuance in talking about being special and being different and what does that mean? And just because if everybody has something, like, that's great. Awesome. Everybody does have something. Yeah. But I hate that conversation of like normies versus this versus that. Like, and that's very much what this was. And I had a really hard time with that because special has a lot like, or, you know, what makes you special? What makes you an individual? What makes you, what's your superpower? You know, like fucking cool. Awesome. But like, just because you don't have perfect accuracy as a marksman or something like that, that's not a superpower necessarily. That doesn't necessarily, because you can hit things good doesn't mean that you are good and right. And this whole film had like, it didn't know what it was trying to say about being right and justice and who is allowed to dispense that. And the next one, I have a bigger conversation about that. Like I said, this film like started a lot of little conversations. Yeah. And the next one is where it's like, it's going to fucking go off. I have to keep stopping myself.
And it goes off in the wrong direction. Yeah, no, I fully agree that, like you said earlier, like none of this was nuanced and none of it was specific. It was all so generalized and broad. Like you said, specifically the word special, like I'm going to make it so everyone's special. So at the end of the day, nobody is. It's like, well, okay, are you going to talk about, like you said, individuality, the individuality of non-supers versus supers? Or are we just going to stick with the celebrity of what the supers are or what privileges they have within a society where there are supers. Like, what? Like, there really was nothing else to it besides that, which was so disappointing just because from what I remember, I was like, wow, this was so good. And then rewatching it, I was like, oh, this is bad. Like, this is just boring. This is bad storytelling. And I will say, I agree with you as far as like with Syndrome. The way he delivered all of his thoughts was terrible. He, to me, was just an involuntarily celibate person, like an incel, who is essentially just being like, well, it's the world's fault that I'm mad, and it's his fault that I'm going to change things. And I'm like, grow up. Come on, really? But his idea of equity was kind of spot on. Like, yeah, dismantle privilege, dude. That's sick. And let's talk about murder in the sense of the Incredibles' hero's journey to upholding the privileges that they have. They're literally murdering people in front of their kids to make sure that when they get home, they still have their privilege. Like, literally killing people in front of their kids and encouraging their kids to kill these other people to uphold the privileges that they have.
Doing a Batman incapacitate?
Oh, no. When they're on the island, those big circle discs are flying and they smash and blow up with the people in them. And like even Dash is on it and he jumps off and then the thing just smashes into another one and both of those people die. I'm like, oh, cool. So you guys are just as fucking garbage as the villain of this, who we're supposed to consider the villain.
Well, and even like regardless, even if they are just incapacitated, you're like teaching your kids that violence is the answer and that this is the way and all this other stuff. Like this whole thing is super gross. And I want to go back just for a second because are you familiar with Ayn Rand?
Yes. So this movie was largely based on The Fountainhead, correct?
No, it was not. And lots of people thought that and everything. So like the concept of man as a heroic being with his own happiness, the moral, whatever, all that stuff, right?
Okay.
So anytime anybody's like, hey, Brad Bird, this, and he's like, no, not at all, whatever. Like he denies it.
He denies it, but in the same way, it's like, because within The Fountainhead, it sort of promotes the idea that in this world, there are very specific and special people. And I think I've never read the book. I only know sort of generalities about it. Mm-hmm. But within that world, those special people are allowed to have good and big things because they get to control things. And at the end of the day, they want to sort of congregate and disappear from regular society because of their specialness. And I use that very specifically within this. Because of their specialness, they want to go to some sort of isolated place where they will not be bothered by the plebes, I guess is a good word to use. You know what I mean? So I think generally this idea of like a specialness and a power that this movie sort of dictates through its narrative, I guess could resonate with that a little bit. Again, he denies that it has anything to do with it, you said?
Yeah, he does. And I also haven't read the works of Ayn Rand either, so I don't know. Yeah. But I remember when I was searching stuff up, it was like, people have talked to him about this, but nope. And so I guess that's a big deal to mention. But like, I feel like even if he did derive any sort of inspiration from that, he's not the kind of person that would be like, yeah, I read that and I thought this. Like, he's not that kind of person, I don't think. I think he'd be like, no, this came from my brain. Like, think of how, like, Mr. Incredible would do it, right? Like, this is mine, and I didn't even know who that person is. You know?
Yeah, I don't know who Anna Rand is, but...
Yeah.
Maybe whatever. Like, shut up.
Also, super, super, super fun, while we're on the topic of fun facts, the animators made Syndrome look like Brad Bird on purpose, 100,000% on purpose, because the schedule for the film required them to work super late hours and all this other stuff for them to like make it out on time. And so they made him look like the boss, and the boss didn't realize that it was him until it was way too late, and he was so pissed.
Really?
Yeah, and I love that. I love that. That's like too. Just a like, oh yeah, you're paying so much attention to all of this. Here, look. Okay. And I imagine like the animators are just like, fucking let's just see what happens. Let's just keep this going. You know?
Yeah. Oh,
let's
I would
push
believe
this
it.
as far as we can. But I love that. And I
love
thought
that
was
too.
really great.
Because I think developing a story like this, I would be also like, what the fuck is this about?
Isn't that interesting that he, like, Brad Bird, like, wrote Mr. Incredible as himself when the people that were working with him and on this saw him as the villain?
Yeah. Well, in some degree, he kind of told on himself, too, because he is the villain of this story. Like,
yeah, exactly.
If he's like, that's actually me, I'm the hero, it's like, oh, are these character attributes
Speedy.
also a part of who you consider yourself to be? Well, yeah, I'm Mr. Incredible. Cool. Got it. Great. Good to know.
Do you think that the family, like, had the last name Parr because they're on par, or then there's subpar, or so, like, as a way to, like, distinguish, like, where they're at, or above par or whatever?
Possibly. What I theorize more so is it's a golf term because white people love golf. And I'm sure he took many golf trips when he was hard at work making this movie. So
probably.
Yeah, either way, and whether it's emblematic of being on par or above par in some capacity as opposed to subpar or golf. Like, he sucks. His story sucks. Yeah.
It does suck. Okay, so I also was extremely confused about Mr. Incredible just in general, because at the very core of himself, he's, like, supposed to be good and he wants to do good and that's all he wants to do, right? But at the same time, like, our first introduction to him is like, oh God, why can't the world just stay saved? And then he's like, oh, well, I still have time. I still have time to do this hero thing. I still have time to do this hero thing, to the point to where he's late to his own wedding, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, he's one of those shitty people that just complains like, oh God, but then it's like, oh, but I get to do all these things. And then he has like a horny hero dick, like, for his whole life. And it's just like, cool, I'm going to go and I'm going to save people because it's the right thing to do. Okay. So I was doing the right thing, even though I hurt all of these people, or even though my family is suffering because of all this stuff, I have to do good because it's the right thing to do, when he doesn't care at all about money or about the lives that he impacts or about anybody or anything. Like, literally what he sees as good, and this is a bigger conversation about justice and who gets to deliver justice and what justice is and who gets to decide that, by trying to save this person from being mugged, he destroys, like, he wastes all of these, like, millions of dollars, like, from taxpayers, right? And he also puts his family in emotional turmoil, and he also does this, and he also does this, but his, like, big defense is like, but I'm a good guy, I'm just trying to do good things. And I'm like, fuck you, like, why are you trying to do that when, like, the only reason he tries to save other people is not because it's the right thing to do, is because that's how he gets validation. That's how he's able to, like, sleep at night. He's like, oh, well, cool, I did this good thing today. You know, like, and then he, like, when he's not doing good, he's like, whatever. And then once he gets that, like, hero gig for Syndrome, he's like, oh, cool. And then suddenly him and the missus are banging again. And now he's not, like, you know, overweight anymore. And then this. And it's like he's impotent unless he's able to dispense his form of justice and just to be who he wants to be without consequence.
Yeah. He wants to choose how and when he gets to deliver his own form of justice with no repercussion or consequence, right? Like, I will argue there was only one scene where I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. When he worked at the insurance agency and that old lady was like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, oh, here's all of our loopholes. Fuck this company. Please go and get the health insurance you deserve from this company. And I was like, you know what? Good for you. In my head, I was like, that is the most heroic thing you've done this entire movie.
It really
like,
is.
That idea where, like, if you in this moment can gain some sort of goodness from this interaction, which he obviously does, he's very excited that he can help her. Like, he's like, hell yeah, like, I love this. The small win. Why do you have to then be this other, what in mainstream we're supposed to believe is, like, heroic, like destroying all this stuff for the sake of whatever, beating all the bad guys? Like, why can't you exist within that realm of self-satisfaction in these small moments of heroism. The one thing that you really did that was like actually good, why not keep doing that, sir?
Well, and it's like a question of like, is it because he's not doing the masculine thing? Is it because he's not making himself feel big?
Yep.
And so when he does feel big, when he does feel powerful, is when he's, it's not when he's helping the old lady with the cat or doing this. It's when he's beating the shit out of something. Yep. And that makes him feel like a big man. And that's when he is suddenly interested in not his wife as a person, but boning his wife, fine. His kids, whatever. He kind of like, because any interaction that he really has with them, it's all so cold or so distant or anything, until maybe they get to the island when they're maybe a bit more interested in each other. But he's interested because they have powers. He's interested because they're able to see him as Big Daddy Man, He's interested in them because they reflect a version of himself that he likes to see because it's ego driven. Yes. He wants to see himself in these people in his life. And the only time he's interested in those people in his life is when they look like him. How fast did you run, Dash? Fuck yeah. And then mom's like, what the fuck? And he's
what the
like,
fuck, dude? Yeah. This is not a good thing to teach our son. What are you doing? But I like how that's like the only time he's interested in his kids. It's only Dash because he's the boy. So he sees himself in that moment as like the young whippersnapper, whatever, heartbreaker, whatever other garbage phrases. He sees himself in that moment as him, and he's like, wow, like that's so cool, and blah, 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 and boys, 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 and beer, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Like, he doesn't give a shit about his daughter.
And meanwhile, he's trying everything he can to get away from his real life.
Yeah.
Like he's just like, cool, I'm going to lie to everybody. Everybody trust me. That's fine. I'm going to go exploit that shit. And I'm going to go play hero.
Truly. And like, even when he gets caught sneaking back in from saving all those people in the burning building and the building falls down, she reminds him that their kid is graduating from one of his grades. And he says they keep finding new ways to celebrate mediocrity.
Yes.
And that's his excuse as to why he doesn't want to go. And then he's like, why don't you let our son try out for sports? And she's like, because it's not fair. And he's like, he would be great at it. She's like, that's cheating, Robert.
He doesn't care.
He doesn't care. And that goes into the conversation about like, after that conversation, they completely dismiss any sort of semblance of a conversation about equity and about privilege, where she's like, no, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, whatever. And then they fight about it. And then after that, it's all she cares about is the fact that he might be fucking some other girl. And you're like, really?
She catches him lying, and her response isn't like, what the fuck? She's like, I love you so much. Hoping that he's going to see her and that he's going to see the life that he has and like that instead of trying to look somewhere else. So she doesn't like, it was so bad.
Yeah, it wasn't good. I also hate how white this movie is. Like,
yeah,
it's interesting that even in a world, in an animated world where you're creating the characters, you're creating the people from scratch, even then, people of color don't get the callback. Even then, it's
Samuel
all white.
L. Jackson.
Except the one token black guy you need in there for reasons that make you feel guilty.
We hear his wife. We never see his wife. And like the way that they wrote her and her dialogue, she's a caricature, of
Well, it's the reiterative angry black woman stereotype that is so garbage and perpetuated in so much media, oftentimes written by white people, which is like, why? But not only that, she doesn't even deserve screen time. Like, not only is she this trope of a person, but even in this moment, she doesn't deserve to be on screen. You know what I mean? And that's my big problem with the other ones. In the next one, they try to do this fun, and we'll get to it. They try to do this fun, like, playback of that same scene where she's, like, off screen yelling. But that movie is a movie about, quote unquote, feminism. And even in the feminist version of this story, she still does not deserve to be on screen. And specifically, white feminism, because in this story, only white women are important, not any women of color. So that's a whole other thing, and we'll get into that then.
And feminism is the overall bad guy in the same way that socialism is the bad guy in this one. feminism is the bad guy in the other one.
Yes.
So,
oh my God. I'm so excited to talk about the next one.
that was made in 2018, y'all.
Yeah. The second one was made in 2018, which, like, I mean, it's not surprising, and I'll say why it's not surprising when we get into it. But yeah, so Frozone in this, he's there at the very beginning and he's there at the very end. They don't include him at all in anything apart from the beginning and the end. Because again, why do we want to see black characters in our media? Brad Bird, right? Like that, I feel like, is the implication of his inclusion and exclusion. Is they're writing it around this idea that, like, we're going to get flack for not having any characters of color in this. Okay, well, let's put the black superhero here. And it's just, again, it's reiterative tokenization of people of color. And it's so, like, when it's done so drastically and caustically, it's just so clear that this is the tokenization of an entire group of people. It's so disheartening and troublesome, and just like, it shades everything in a completely different light, because you're like, well, if you're writing this story around whiteness and white people, or rather you're writing this story only thinking about whiteness and white people, why do I care?
Yeah. And it's also like, even if like they're trying to be like, this is a callback to 1950s, whatever. And this is also like where, you know, we're being historically accurate or all this other stuff. We've been going through Westworld here at my house, and
yeah.
Like that has its problems. It has its great moments. But one of the things that I love about that show is nobody's horny for purity, I guess. And like, you know, the fact that we have people of color throughout this entire show. We have women who are in prominent like law enforcement and stuff like that are like sheriffs, that are this, like in a Western setting, right?
Yeah.
And it is so fluid, and it doesn't, like, I've never once been like, no, that's not how this would be. That's not how this is going to be. And it's also not questioned within the narrative. It's not celebrated within the narrative. It just is. And that's, I think, a great way to be like, cool, we can all inhabit multiple positions. We can all, you know, like, it doesn't matter. And this was just very reiterative of those gender norms, of like the racial stereotypes, of all this stuff. It was not interested in reinventing the wheel. It wanted to make it look pretty and shiny.
Yeah, they weren't interested in it at all. They wanted to make sure it was sellable and white sells. You know what I mean?
With Disney.
with Disney, white sells. Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. And it's frustrating, and the sequel doesn't alleviate any of my frustration. In fact, it just enrages it more, like, because there is inclusion in the second one, but like the way they included characters of color into it is just so fucking gross with the narrative that it's sort of the backdrop to. And I don't, like, white people need to stop writing for characters of color. Like,
agreed.
Just end of the day, hire some black writers. There are creatives in every demographic, in every community, in every culture. There are creatives. We like, they're there. Hire some. Stop hiring white men. Like, stop hiring white men to do everything and be like, well, maybe let's get a black consultant on this. Like, no, hire black writers. Hire writers of color. Hire anybody but white men. Hire women, you know?
Maybe then, like, we wouldn't have these gross stereotypes. We wouldn't. All of the women in this movie were cautious and scared. That was their whole character. They were there to support and to question. And the men were overconfident and didn't think. And then, like you said, there's a black guy, like, that's there sometimes. And something that I also have a really hard time with is, so often it's either like there's the token black characters and there's this, but then we also forget, like, where's the Asian representation? Where is anybody other than, there's so many other characters that white people should not inhabit. And let's open this shit up.
Yeah.
Let's open this pit up.
Just the fact that white is default just solidifies the fact that we live in a white supremacy. We live in a society that favors white skin. We live in a place where if you're anything other than white and male bodied, you have it harder than the rest, and so it's just like, I don't even really know what else to say, because there's not much to say about Frozone, because he's not there. He's not there. He's billed as like one of the lead superheroes in this, and then he's not in the movie. He's not in this movie. And also,
he inhabits that other token role where people of color are the voice of reason, right?
Yeah.
So like in the beginning, like, when they go and they're like listening to the scanner, he's like, dude, we should stop doing this. Like, hey, he's trying to be there and be supportive of his friend, but he's also trying to be like, hey, you need to just live your life, like this is not okay. We don't need to do this anymore. And like, that sucks that he was just such a stereotype of a character.
Yeah. Yeah. So even the moments that he was there, he was thrown into this trope of wise black man or some other stereotypical version of what white people see as black characters, or as the only I am so mad about how white and shitty this movie is. Like, I'm not surprised that I loved it when I was a kid, because in this society, I have so much privilege by the way I look, and I understand that. So for me, seeing like these white characters, I was like, oh wow, which is why, like, again, representation matters, which I have so much to say about that in the next one.
Same.
And why there's no follow through on these ideas. Like, it's in writing these movies, it felt like they wanted to get credit for an idea without actually enacting or sort of envisioning or creating the idea. They wanted to just put it on the table and be like, actually, what if it was representation? Or actually, what if feminism? Or actually, what if this? They want to get credit for having put the idea on the table. No, Queen, you got to make the thing. Like, you have to take that idea and make something out of it. It's just an idea. You don't get credit for a fucking idea. You get credit for the creation of the thing.
Well, and it's also, instead of showing the idea, they'd be like, oh, but what if? And then they would show the complete opposite. So I couldn't tell if this was trying to find ways to celebrate mediocrity, or if it was, like dissing mediocrity. Yeah. If it was hating capitalism, or if it was only hating it when you're not doing the quote unquote right thing. So they deserve to be in that, like, he felt like he deserved that position of wealth, right? And then, is it bad for everybody to be special, or is it good if it's only just a few? They spent like fucking 10 minutes on a collective fat joke that did not end, right? And then Edna has that moment where she is talking shit on supermodels and how shitty they are. So if you're overweight, if you're underweight, you fucked. But if you're perfectly in the middle, you're fine.
Yeah. Well, also, we didn't even get into any of the discussion about class that they were trying to kind of talk about. Again, it's only kind of because they didn't fucking follow through. But even in that moment when Mr. Incredible loses his job because he punches what's-his-name through the wall, his boss, he hates his job, right? He wants to be a super, all this stuff. But every time he's at this job, like, he thinks the job's beneath him. Like, so to him, he's like, I'm special. When this, and again, this dude of short stature, he's this short guy who's talking down to him. He doesn't like being talked down to because he's big man. He's big, strong, special man who needs to be on the top, who needs to be told he's special, who needs adoration, who needs celebrity, who needs fame, who needs wealth because he is special, because he worked for it? No, not at all. In that moment, he hates being talked down to because he doesn't deserve that. And what they justify that as being is he sees this robbery happening. He's like, I need to go help them right now and blah, blah, blah. And the thing that sets him off is essentially he says, like, the bad guy got away. And then his boss is like, yeah, bad things happen all the time or something.
I think he also said something like, hopefully he has our insurance or something.
Oh, yeah.
But like it was just extremely dismissive of what was happening and of big man's feelings. But like at the same time, he's also super dismissive of everybody else's feelings. So it's okay for him to have and express these feelings of anger and frustration and everything. But like, you know, when his feelings are not being validated. But it's not okay when somebody like Violet does that, or it's not okay when his wife does that. Like, he doesn't see past his own emotions and the scope of how it affects him directly. Not even his family, but him directly.
Well, like, look at the action of him throwing that guy through all of those walls. Some other superhero could see that and be like, that guy's a villain.
Exactly.
His action of violence is so unindicative of anything just. Like, his idea of what is what is justice in this system. Like, it's so convoluted, and as a viewer, we're seeing this man as a hero, but it's like he can kind of do whatever he wants and hurt or do anything in the name of quote unquote justice, which I guess is sort of the premise of like why superheroes are bad. But even in this story, we're looking at a protagonist who is the epitome of this thing, of pro-violent, unique. He's so boring. I fucking hate him.
I also do. I hate him a lot.
Yeah.
And you know what? Avengers told the story and they told it better.
Yeah. I mean, to some degree, fuck all superheroes. I'm like so tired of every fucking superhero. Like, superheroes are fucking cops. That's all they are. They're cops with spandex. And I'm like, cool, great. Like, fuck you.
We should do a superhero movie next.
We should. Oh my God. I feel like, yeah.
So, did you know that Edna was voiced by Brad Bird?
I guess not. No, I didn't.
Yeah, he had tried out other people for her, but then eventually, like, they decided that he was just going to voice her himself. And she's also the voice of reason in this whole thing too, right? She's like, "You're Elastigirl, pull yourself together," and she's also like, "I never look back because I'm here in the now," and all this other stuff, right? So we have the holy trinity of Brad Bird here as the hero, the villain, and the voice of reason, which made me laugh really hard.
That's actually fantastic. God, talk about a narcissistic narrative. Jesus Christ.
Fucking right?
That's crazy. I love that.
And so then I also wanted to talk about the two dudes at the end who I think I heard were supposed to be like some of Walt's Nine Old Men or whatever, but they were like, there's no school like the old school, because this movie is horny for the 1960s, and that's just what they want, and they just want that real bad because
this movie is horny for racial segregation is what this movie is horny for. That is all this movie is horny for.
Oh no. And gender stereotypes.
And oh my God, it's 1950s. I will say though, I still love Edna Mode. As Loki is problematic as she can come off at times, I think
love her.
She is my favorite character in both movies. She is so cool, so cute, so
confident.
So confident. She's so fucking sick. I loved her. And I also want to point out the queer canon of this movie is when she's on the phone with Mr. Incredible, the fireplace that's behind her is an aquarium, and it's a bunch of these butterfly fish swimming past a red light, so it makes it look like flames. And I was like, that fireplace is queer canon for this film. That is like the gayest, coolest, gorgeous. Like, I love it, and it looked great too. Oh my God.
Hell yeah.
That fireplace was it.
Her character is the best one out of the entire fucking movie. She's always confident. She's always calling people on their bullshit. She also knows that she's good. And she's like, look, you are going to come to me for your fucking costume. Look, and she doesn't like, it's also so interesting because she knows what people want, even though they themselves don't know what they want.
Yes.
Because she's like, okay, cool. Like, and he's like, no, just the old one is fine. And she's like, you're living in the past. You need to live in now. I'm going to make you a new suit. And she like also like correctly predicted, like she just made the kids suits. It wasn't like they asked her to do it. She's just like, oh, cool. I got it here. By the way, I did this. By the way, here's this. Like, and she never gets a thank you. She never does anything. She does it because she wants to. She just knows what everybody wants or what everybody needs.
I also like that it's just under the guise of like, I'm an artist, darling. I know these things. I'm like, yeah, dude. You're so, she's so cool. She was the coolest part of this movie. Oh my God. She was so great. I forget about her sometimes. And I'm like, every time I think about her, I'm like, yeah, man, Edna was the coolest. Like
in the next movie too, like she was just like
her and Jack, like that whole thing. It was so,
the whole shit was so good.
So wonderful. So wonderful.
Are we ready to talk about the next one? Is there anything else we want to talk about with this one?
No, I think we've exhausted this one. I'm so ready to talk about the next one.
Okay, let's do it.
Cool, let's do it. Picking up exactly where the first movie left off, the Incredibles get arrested after their confrontation with the Underminer. With no home and no options, they are approached by telecom mastermind Winston DeVore and his sister Evelyn, who, riddled with nostalgia, are looking to rebrand the Supers and make hero work legal again. Utilizing body cams and the Elastigirl image, Helen goes to the big city while Mr. Incredible stays home with the kids.
Elastigirl saves the day by thwarting the evil plans of the screenslaver, #girlboss while Mr. Incredible struggles with what would be considered female responsibilities, #feminism, #breaking the stereotype. Oh no, it turns out Evelyn was evil all along and is using hypnotism to convince the public that supers are no good. The Incredibles save the day, $1 billion home gets destroyed, $1 billion boat gets destroyed, and so many white characters. Hooray!
Gotta love white characters.
Do we?
No.
There's just so many of them.
#breaking the stereotype.
That made me giggle quite a bit when I was reading that. I was like, holy shit.
It's so silly. But I felt so, those were so goofy because I felt like that was the tone of this movie. It was like, see, we get it. We're breaking the stereotype. Feminism. Also this. And it's like...
Also feminism is bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's doing nothing that it's proposed. It's again, it's a Walmart ad for gay pride. It's a Walmart ad for feminism. It's a Walmart ad for inclusivity.
And representation. That super patronizing moment where it's like, oh my God, I'm so happy. Where Void goes up to Elastigirl and like it was like, great, cool. So this is what you think you are doing for women right now. Because Elastigirl is front and center. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I want to start fully at the beginning. And just to like get some things out of the way structurally where they're bringing up ideas and then completely dismissing them. So after the big fight with Underminer, everything happens. Frozone's there. He disappears. He's like, I'm out of here. Bye. The Incredibles get arrested. Later on, he shows up. They ask him, where did you go? And he says, don't be mad at me because I know when to leave a party. And besides, I knew they'd let you guys go. So... that line is implying racial injustice and systematic inequality against marginalized groups, against black folks, against any non-white people. So as a black man, he is telling them that, like, I knew that you guys would be let go. I wouldn't. That's the implication of this line. Cool. So we're setting it up to know that in this world, there's racial injustice, right? We don't go anywhere with that. We don't talk about it.
Nope.
What we go into is them essentially becoming cops because they go to this telecom folks, the siblings who are like, we want to make a better name for supers. What better way than adding body cams to your super suits so the world can see you're not bad guys? This movie came out in 2018. This movie is talking about cops. This movie is talking about rebranding the image of cops as not black people killers, but as the good superheroes. This movie is fucking pro cop. Like, straight up. That's all this like, what? Are you kidding me? In 2018, you're making a movie where superheroes have to wear like, what?
It's also weird the way that they treat politicians, where they're like, politicians don't get it, but we do. And there's a specific line where it says they don't understand people that do good just because it was right. So implying that they should be above the law. And that's a huge fucking thing with this is they want to be above the law to do what is good and what is right. But then what is good and what is right and who gets to decide that? And in that and in those very white choices that these people are making, how is that affecting these marginalized groups? How is that affecting anybody that is not wealthy? How is that affecting people that aren't men? You know?
Yep.
And so I had the biggest problem with this movie because, yeah, it is extremely pro-crop in a way. Like, it really felt, it was really hard. I stopped this movie like every 5 minutes to write shit down or because I was like, what the fuck?
Well, because like you're establishing in that first scene that there's racial injustice. He knows it. Everyone knows it. But then we're just going to skate over that. It's like, now he's a cop, wears a body cam. Let's change the image. Like,
oh, she.
Okay.
Because they're centering Elastigirl in this one, right? So
yes.
That's cool because like we're feminist, we're showing Mrs. Incredible, and look at how hard her life is as a housewife, and look at how hard her life because she has to be empathetic and she has to do all this other stuff, and God forbid this man knows how to talk to his fucking children, you know. God forbid he knows how to cook dinner or put a fucking baby to bed. God, like I fucking hate when like they like by trying to break all of these gender norms, they're normalizing it even further. And then it's like when he does a good job, it's like daddy gets a cookie because daddy did a great job. When meanwhile, mom did this for how long and fucking was awesome at it. And one of the things I love about Elastigirl in certain parts of this movie, I'll say, is we get this picture of her that we didn't know existed before. Because in the previous movie, we saw her in the very beginning, like, I kick ass, I'm at the top of my game, cool. And then she gives everything up to be a mom and to be a homemaker. Right. And then, like, you know, all of a sudden she gets to be in the spotlight and her husband is, well, we'll get into his like, well, whatever, I guess, blah. But she gets on the bike and he's like, can you even ride one of these? And she's like, yeah, there's things you don't know about me. And so like, to me, I was like, that's really interesting because there's a couple moments where she does something like that or she says something like that where she like has been making herself small this entire time that we've seen her on screen. And when we get these little nuggets, it's like, ooh, I do want to know about that. I do want to see you kick ass. And the only time that we really genuinely see her excited beyond anything is when she's telling her husband about the fight that she was in. Right? Because she felt like she could take care of herself again. And she was the one that finally got attention again. And she never was allowed to have this moment of joy. But even in that moment of joy, right? Like right after that, it's like she's beating herself up because even though she got the person, she didn't get him. You know, she saved the day and there was like no casualties or no whatever, but she still didn't get him. So she can't let herself have these small victories, whereas her husband would have been like, fuck yeah, I did it. I'll get him another day. It's fine. You know, job well done. All right, clocking out, gonna go to bed. And she's just like racking her brain trying to figure. So again, they were still stereotyping that.
It's frustrating, but what to me was even further frustrating was like, because the narrative of this quote unquote pro-feminist storyline was so apparent, it dismissed everything that wasn't that. Anything. Oh, sorry. Let me be more clear. White feminism.
Yes.
It was everything that was white.
Rich white feminism.
Rich white feminist. Exactly. Yeah. So her moment of joy, her first time back in it, they go to the city. It's like, we're rebranding you. She's like, hell yeah. She's finding joy in being put in the, and I quote, smack in the middle of the worst crime area in the city. So we've already established in this movie that there is racial prejudice and systemic inequality. She's finding joy in the idea of possibly killing a poor brown person or putting somebody who has been disenfranchised their whole life for stealing like $5 or doing some small crime. She wants to be there and be like, I'm going to stop this. This rich white feminist is trying to show up in this poor community, catch them doing something, and put them behind like, fuck Elastigirl.
Well, I'm going to push back just a slight bit because she's actually put there by a richer white dude, right?
Yes.
And they don't do a good job of showing this. I feel like this would have been a more compelling argument if they were like, cool, her family is having to suppress who they are. It is hurting them as a family. Because also, they don't fucking talk about anything that happened.
No.
They don't talk about, like, there's, especially like mom and dad, there's no sorry, there's no none of that, right? So, but it's apparent that everybody is hurting because they have to hide who they are. And that's really difficult, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, if you want to make it about that and then you're trying to make it so your family is accepted, okay, but then also she's leading another richer ass white man's crusade, and so she's just doing what he tells her to do when he tells her to do it. So she, in this independence that she's feeling and in the spotlight and everything, she's just another puppet for another person. And then it turns out that she's also a puppet for another woman. And it's like,
But in that moment, even though, yes, she was put there by this person, she is like luxuriating on her bike. She is finding so much joy in the idea of being there in this poor community, in this quote unquote crime infested community to catch somebody. So she's just as culpable. Like at that point, again, they're opening small doors to these conversations about inequality and that kind of stuff, but they never step through them. So in this moment, why doesn't she step back and be like, why are we in the poor community? Why are we doing this here? Don't you think we should be looking at these like push back, Queen? Come on. Like,
yeah, we all make choices, and she made a choice to just say like, okay.
She made a choice that benefits her because this is going to be an easy win. No matter who it hurts and no matter who it drags down, it's an easy win for her to maintain her place of privilege.
But she is also the easy win herself. So that's why she's there. So she's in the place that's an easy win as the easy win herself.
Yeah.
And also the person that puts her there. Let's talk about that brother. Let's talk about that nostalgic son of a bitch who is super clean cut and is super like, the supers. My dad died because he believed in the supers. And you're like, all right, calm down. Like, it's fine. And then he was like, he has these like little fucking lines where like he was talking about, we're going to go here. There's so much crime. There's all this. It's a superhero's playground, because he's so far removed from it that these people and their lives, like you were saying, stealing $5 or doing this or like that is a playground for people to dispense what they feel is their justice. Right. And then after that, Elastigirl's like, yeah, but we're still illegal. So again, above the law, trying to be like, hey, like, no, it's fine. He says, oh, I know the police commissioner. It's fine.
Yeah. We can do this because we're above the law.
Yeah, no, it's cool because he has so much money and so much power. And he's just like, yeah, no, it's fine. It doesn't matter.
But I mean, even in that, like, I will still bat back against Elastigirl being an asshole completely in this, because she doesn't even bat an eye against that. Like, she's supposed to be against any injustice, right? Like, she's supposed to be delivering justice. She's like,
oh, I agree.
I'm here helping. So she doesn't bat against that. She's like, isn't this bad? And he's like, I know the police commissioner. Oh, okay, cool. That's illegal, Queen. Like, that's bad. Like, that is injustice.
5 minutes ago, she had this conversation with her kids about like, she was like, well, there's like, her husband was the one that was like, well, we got to do this to change the law. And she's like, there are laws to change the laws. We don't need to do this. And then like 5 minutes later, she's like, oh, wait, I get to be the star. Oh, I get to be this person. And
yes.
A lot of that, I think she agreed with it, was yes, white feminism, but also she had been small for so long and never even been allowed to like take up any emotional space in her husband's life or in anything. And she's had to like, even their conversation about like, well, it's okay. You've worked in the private sector for a while. I can work in the private sector. And he's like, no, I'm the man, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, well, it's my turn. Let me help. And so this is, I think I would like to think that some of it was also her getting back at him. But then again, like, all she was doing was not really thinking about why she was doing it or how she was going about doing it, but just her own motivations, which were completely selfish.
Yeah. And to me, I'm like, she was small for so long, and I get it. I get this is your moment, your time to shine. But what it rings so emblematic in this white story is she is willing to take that opportunity at the expense of a poorer, less white person. She's willing to take that moment for herself to be an independent person and to bask in what she knows is her own strength at the expense of poor brown folks.
And then let's get into the even more shitty feminist, white feminist in this, who is the sister. I don't even remember her name, but she is...
Oh, Evelyn, yeah.
Evelyn. So while her brother is very clean cut, very like good old boy looking, right? She is just kind of like, has like mangy hair, is kind of like unkempt, kind of whatever. And she's the intellectual, and she's more of like, I think they're trying to present her as more of like the militant feminist, right? Because she doesn't care who she hurts or what she does, like, because the means justify the ends and nobody else matters. And she's sacrificing even this woman that we could have been friends, like, you know, like all these fucking lines. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, she's more true to who she is, just because she's not pretending that she's doing this for other people. She knows that she's doing this for her.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, again, at the end of the day, I empathize with her more than
I do
everybody else. Like when Evelyn has Elastigirl tied to the frozen chair in the frozen room, and Elastigirl's essentially like, I counted on you. And Evelyn's like, that's why you failed. Why would you count on me? Because I built you a bike? Yeah. You don't know me. We're not friends. We don't know each other. It's been a day. And
I
it's
love that.
so emblematic of like this idea of like, to me, and this is how I read this, is this sort of camaraderie of whiteness where she's like, well, you're like me, so I trust you. She's like, we don't know each other, Queen. Like,
yeah.
We don't know each other at all. What the fuck makes you think that like I'm to be trusted? We met yesterday. Like,
yeah.
I thought that was so funny when she's like, I don't know you.
I loved that so much.
Oh my God.
It was so good.
I mean, obviously she was still trash. Like, the whole idea of like her not liking the supers because the supers killed her parents. Dude, the supers didn't kill your parents. Like, people broke into your home. It seemed very simple and silly. And I was like, some of the ideas that she was like talking about justice, but again, it's coming from this incredibly wealthy white person who's talking about injustice, and so fuck her completely. Also, so continuing on this sort of white feminist narrative of the story, I feel like this Brad Bird tried to pat himself on the back in so many moments with this movie to be like, ha, feminism win, girl boss, blah. Like, I get it because women. And it felt so bad and silly and just like, what? Like, there's even a scene later, they include a commercial for, it was a commercial that was on TV when they were going to the broadcast of all the nations sort of signing this bill saying supers are okay to practice again. And it was like this guy cooking. It's like, so easy. Even he can do it. And I'm like,
yeah,
cool. Yeah, sure. But in my head, I can just feel him being like, yeah, think about that, America. And being like, you're so silly. Like, that is the most simple, boring, bi-gendered thing. It's so simple and like so unthoughtful. Because I'm like, yeah, sure, let's talk about this. But it seems like I love a story where Elastigirl's the lead. She was way more interesting than him in the first one. I am so on board for this. But again, it's a story about women written by a man. And I'm just like, you don't have a frame of reference to write any of this. Like, what do you mean? Like, so a lot of it to me, it just felt so disingenuous and so incredibly flat.
Incredibly.
incredibly flat. Just all of the sort of the feminist stuff felt so flat. It felt so unthoughtful.
It felt like in the 90s and like early 2000s when we had a lot of like the depictions of feminism, and I'm thinking specifically of like there's this episode of the Powerpuff Girls where the bad guy is like, or the bad girl is this femme, and like the feminist the woman symbol is like it's on her clothes, it's the shape of her gun, it's the shape of her mask, it's all this, and she says some super super smart stuff, but again she's portrayed in the same way, and it's just like, what the fuck? Like, she's so shallow, and she's also written, her dialogue is to be bad or is to be misinterpreted. It's like somebody watched a Fox News piece on what feminism is and then was like, oh, yeah, that's what this is. And then they wrote a character based on Fox News's perception of feminism. You know?
Which low-key, I would believe Brad Bird did.
Well, and so like while you're talking about like feminism and everything, for me that's not what this film was at all, because like I felt, and maybe it's because I was so fucking mad about Mr. Incredible, I felt like Elastigirl whatever is like getting her moment, but like a bigger part of the story I think was centered around the dude. So even in this film where they're trying to like here women, here feminism, here all of this, and it's
still about Mr. Incredible.
They're still making about him and how it's hard. And they had an excellent opportunity with his character in this to explore and to ask tough questions and to look inside of himself and to really excel at this and to be a better person and for him to grow. He did not do any of that. Instead, he avoided all of the hard questions because he didn't want to look inside of him. Like, his kids were asking him all of these tough things and he's like, yo, whatever. And he was doing that because he doesn't want to have to, like, you know, we talk about a few times on this podcast, the unexamined life. Like, he's there and he benefits from all of this privilege and all these other things. So, of course, he doesn't want to think about that. Like, he's trying to solve all of the problems in the same way, like emotionally, in the same way that he solves all of the bad guy problems, which is with brute force and just right there and all of this. And that doesn't work. So, okay, there's a cool way for him to start learning through that and everything. Does he? Fucking no. Instead, his kids have to adapt to that, and his baby bonds with somebody else, and his kids kind of like become that person. Like, they don't become that person for each other. Instead, they fall into their own gender roles that are assigned to them, the monkey see, monkey do thing. Like, the way that they parent in this pisses me off so much because it's like, at the end of the last movie, it was like, cool, we're super family. And then it's like, we're not going to do this ever again, pushing that down. Like, you know, well, we did it before. Why can't we do it now? It's like, oh, well, because we can't. Don't worry. And then they go off and do it themselves. Like, they're such fucking hypocrites in the way that they parent and in the way that they trivialize their children's emotions, especially Violet, who, like, she's like breaking down and Dash says, is this adolescence? And like they're just trivializing and making her whole world at that point so small, because guess what? Violet's main fucking conflict is a boy. Is a fucking boy. And then even at the end, in the very final fight, she's like, look, I know that I can come help and fight, but Jack needs me, so you guys are going to make it. It's fine. And she gives into that maternal instinct, which also Edna does too. Edna, like every woman in this story, is a fucking babysitter.
Yeah. So it rests on its gender expectation. So it tries to do the thing where it's like, see, we're switching, but really at the end of the day, it just re-solidifies their understanding of what gender is.
Yes.
In a very, very simple way, what gender roles are, what is expected of women, what is expected of men. And to them, in this story, only two genders exist. Like, there is no spectrum. There is no queer or non-bi-normative, bi-gendered existence in this story. Like, with Mr. Incredible, like you said, this would have been such a cool opportunity for him to question things, to think about what gender expectation is, to think about his toxic masculinity, to think about sort of cyclical and inherited trauma, thinking about how he's teaching his kids to be pro-violent, like thinking he could have spent so much time thinking about all this stuff and spent zero time thinking about this stuff. Was just
Instead,
like, I can be better than my wife. Like, he hates her.
Oh my
The whole
God.
movie, he fucking hates her. Like, he's like, oh, she's getting popular, and I'm so mad that I have to like raise my kids, blah. I'm so angry at her, but I want to like have sex with her, and it's just like, this is gross and so wild. Not at all unexpected when we're seeing who's writing this story, but I guess, yeah, very typical of somebody like him who thinks that this is like cool and fine and fun, whatever. But were you going to say something? You were going to say something else.
Oh, I was going to go the one dude in the film that we hadn't talked about, which is the baby. So he's like hanging out with daddy. He's learning from daddy. That's cool. That's fine. But then, like, part of the monkey see, monkey do thing, right? So, like, the two other kids were, like, breaking the rules and doing, like, some hero stuff, and then they save the day and whatever. Meanwhile, Jack is looking at the TV, and he's like, oh, like, and he sees himself in this hero guy, right? And then he sees the little raccoon stealing something out of the trash, and he's like, and it's over trash too. It's not like over like, you know, like a pool toy or something. It's, he's stealing my trash. I'm gonna get him. And he goes on. And that's how, like, when his powers like fully fucking manifest, right? Is when he feels like he needs to take this in his own hands. He needs to protect this. He needs to do that. And he's so celebrated by his dad for all of this stuff. And then, but he's like, I don't know how to teach him how to be a man. So he sends him off to Edna to control his power or whatever, because he has power, which dad doesn't know how to control, right? So give him to a woman so that way he can like start to exude some control over him. Over his own self. Like, yeah.
Well, it opens that whole conversation.
It was very cute, though. It was so cute. And I love
that whole sequence. I will say I did love it. Thinking about contextually what the sequence meant, I absolutely hate it. Mm-hmm. Apparently, that was supposed to be in the first movie, but they couldn't fit it in. Like, Jack was supposed to discover his powers in the first movie with the raccoon. Like, the raccoon fight was a big part of development from the first one, and then they just couldn't story-wise fit it in anywhere. Weird. So that was like one of the shining sequences for this one, where they were like, that has to be in here, we'll make it work. But I want to jump, like, so there's a scene earlier that opens the door about representation, right? So when they're in the limo ride over to DevTech, they get out, the limo driver, he's this person of color. He's like, oh, thank you, you're here. He's fumbling over his words because he's trying to tell Frozone how much he means to him. Like, you're my hero. Like, it's essentially like, you look like me. I get to see myself in you. I get to see you achieve and succeed in this way, and you give me hope in that way. So, again, we're opening the door to representation. We're opening to, like, being able to see something and react to it, and cool. We're seeing this garbage version of that to some degree with Jack when he's watching TV. Also, he's seeing his parents just be wild, the kids be wild. Nothing matters, everything's fine. He sees this TV with the guy with the things on his eyes, like a little mask, robbing a bank. He sees a raccoon who looks like he has a mask on his eyes. And because there is this, he's perceiving this on TV and seeing something that looks similar. Oh, that thing must be doing something bad, so I'm going to go destroy it. So in this moment, we're supposed to be celebrating this baby, even though he's trying to destroy something based on media
based on
stereotype.
The way it looks.
But yeah, based on media stereotypes. So like, this show was created, these characters were created. In this moment, digesting what the TV is showing and then taking that directly, it's seeing something that looked similar and being like, that thing's bad. So racial stereotypes and portrayals of marginalized communities and people of color. Again, you're opening this door. You're dipping your toe into the pool. talk about it.
Well, and they overtly say it too. When the brother is talking about like the reason that supers, nobody wants them around right now is because the way the media portrays them, the way that you're perceived. So we're going to change the perception. So it starts that conversation extremely early, but then it just continues the status quo. And that's what the last movie and this movie both do, is it poses this question, or it's like, look, I know what I am, without ever actually questioning itself. So they think that they're being intellectual by saying all of this, but they're not actually going through and looking at the script to see if that matches the tone or what they're showing.
Yeah. It's essentially like being like, okay, we're going to talk about racial injustice, but what if we talk about it only on white people? And you're like, wait, what? That defeats the point. It's like, no, it doesn't, because representation matters and cops. And you're like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And again, even in this moment where Jack's trying to destroy this thing that he thinks he saw on TV, he's rewarded for it. He's rewarded for his action against this thing for the sake of quote unquote justice, when in fact, how is any of that just? How is him trying to kill a fucking raccoon who's just trying to eat some trash? Again, shit y'all threw out. Yeah. How is that just? How is any of that to be applauded? Fuck Mr. Incredible. Fuck
this is just so messy, and it didn't know, like, neither movie knew what it wanted to say or how to say it. And like, for all of the tension and all of the questions that it posed, there was never a conversation. There was never a questioning. It was just like, huh. Or it was like, duh. And it just like, it just felt like these things were put in there to make you as a viewer think about it. But then, I mean, what's more powerful is showing something, right? And they never got to, like, you know, they were like, oh, this is a good line, or oh, this is good, or like, you know, yeah, see, this is what we mean. But again, like, they never went further into that, into the story and into what they were actually trying to say and what the problems were around that. And both of these just, like, it's so messy. Like, cool, okay, if you want to celebrate that your kid has powers, the whole cookie thing, that was funny, that's fine. Like, you can't get the baby's in an alternate dimension and he'll only come out for cookies. Chill, I'm done with that, you know.
Yeah.
But again, to sort himself out, then you need to give him to the, like, I loved Edna and Baby together. Edna and Jack were so cute. Like, when he was eating his, like, little lollipop the same way that she holds her little fucking cigarette holder that's not a cigarette because it's a Disney movie, right? Like, that was so cute.
Yeah, I agree. I love the Edna Jack scenes. They were very fun, very cute.
The woman is still a babysitter, though.
Yeah, exactly. It's this movie was bad. This movie was so poorly written. And also, if in the moment where Jack is watching TV, sees the mask and then sees a raccoon with that, Jack is seeing this mask as a negative. Every person in that family wears that mask. Every one of their friends wears that fucking mask. So why is Jack only responding to the raccoon and not, like, if that's how you're tying this in, if that's what it's like learned, then why aren't they responding to everybody else who has that mask? Why isn't there a visceral reaction when they put on the masks? Jack takes that mask and just puts it on. And he's like, blah. And it's like, no, you guys don't know what you're saying. You guys don't know what you want to say. You're trying to talk about racial injustice, but you're erasing everybody who's not white. You're then taking these black characters and making them the judge or making them cops because you're trying to say that you're pro cop. Like, you're this is such a gross, reductive erasure of truth and of true injustice. So you're having this movie about superheroes who want to fight against injustice, but you're erasing all of the unjust, problematic, systemic structures. You're erasing everything within that narrative because you don't want to talk about it. Because Brad Bird doesn't want to talk about it. He's some white guy who doesn't want to talk about racial injustice. And he's some white guy who works in fucking Emeryville. I'm sure he doesn't want to talk about it because he's in a black neighborhood to some extent near Oakland. Like, in that way, I'm sure that he's like, well, we're not talking about that. And I'm like, go fuck yourself, you coward. Like, you opened this door to this narrative. You opened the conversation about injustice, but you're going to make the choice to completely gloss over anything that has to do with marginalized groups.
Yeah. No,
what the fuck?
It's fact. And like anybody that's not a man is treated like shit. And then even though like the central male figure is supposed to be really relatable because he doesn't knew math, why did they change math? You know, like I need AA batteries, but I got AAA. Like, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Your life is hard. Meanwhile, you're going to spend so much time on that, but you can't spend any time talking about inequality of wealth or racist depictions of these people or racial inequality or you're not going to spend any time talking about that. Instead, you're just going to write this loose ass plot so you can put so you can show your struggles as a parent.
Yeah. I mean, even look at this moment too, where like when he wakes up from his like 19-hour nap and what's on the TV? Johnny Quest. What is Johnny Quest known for? Treating minorities great.
Yes. Yes.
Why was Johnny Quest on TV? Like,
they could have picked anything. They could have made something up.
But no, we're showing a show that is very, very famous for not treating people of color well and not doing a good job at erasing any sort of stereotypical depictions of marginalized people. So, in that way, I think that was put there for nostalgia. I think it was a show that they liked or that he liked, and he put it in because he's like, superheroes, and you're like, you are so dense.
2018, y'all. 2018 is when this movie came out.
It makes me so mad. That's because choices like that undermine anything they were trying to say, which was very little, again, because it is the erasure of racial injustice. That's what this movie fucking did. And then, okay, now I want to get into the queer coding and that whole thing.
Yes, please.
So when we meet Void and all of these sort of like outlier heroes who are in hiding, they almost make it like, not almost, they do make this a group of queer people intentionally in the language that they use when they're sort of introducing themselves, but also in the way that they look and exist and walk and talk. So like when we first meet Void, she's like very shy and nervous around Elastigirl, not implying any sort of attraction, but she's showing her skill and she's like, I just want to thank you for like being you. And I felt like an outcast, but now with you being you, I feel like yay me. So because you came out, I can come out. It's safe to come out now. We can come out. We're gay. We're queer. Okay, cool. But we're not going to say that because we don't want to talk about queer people. We don't want to talk about gay people in this world. We don't want to talk... Again, it's erasing anything that's not white or bigendered or... Yes,
Pixar,
like fuck...
Whatever,
like
same
fuck
thing.
off. Y'all... They want to get points for talking about racial injustice. They want to get points for talking about queer existence. They want to get points for talking about feminism. They want to get points for it without talking about it.
Yeah.
Bullshit. And like even looking at each one of these people, so the guy with lightning, I don't remember his name, but they animated his wrists to be like very limp and very this. Like if you go back and watch him, he's very angular and what you would call swishy and kind of like feminine. So he's a male presenting person who is feminine. Okay. Then Brick, who is this, who we assume is like a gender non-conforming character because they carry traits within them that are both masculine and feminine. And Helen's response to them was like, oh, okay. Like, where are you from? Wisconsin. Like, oh, so she's uncomfortable around these queer people, around people who like, what is the point here? Like, why is this? So if there's not a queer narrative, why are you making this group of outcasts that she's uncomfortable with gay or queer? Why are you making that choice? And again, look at their costumes. Each one of them was a distinct primary color. There's blue, there's yellow, there's orange, like, or red. They each represent, so them standing together, they look like a fucking pride flag.
I didn't even fucking catch that, but you're right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so silly, and I didn't get it. I didn't get why that was... I mean, I guess it makes sense, like, they want to talk about it without talking about it, but just the queer coding of it, in the way that every sort of structure within this that they wash over is reductive, this is no different, right?
Yeah.
Like, but that was another thing that I was like, wow, you guys really fucking suck here. Like,
well, and that's even like a even smaller part of everything else, like you were saying. Like okay, cool. And instead of focusing on the things that matter, we're gonna focus on the wrong idea of feminism and on dad. On dad not knowing the right thing to do, so be sad for him because he's bad at being a dad. Boring.
Because really, like, a lot of that, why was, like, if you took those outcasts out of this movie, what would have changed? There'd be no henchmen, I guess, for her.
That's it, yeah.
That's the only thing, because they're really not there. They tried to give Void a storyline, but then took it away from her.
They were there to be conflict, because that's the big fight scene, is them at the end. So they were there literally just to be punching bags.
What an ill-conceived notion. What an ill-conceived beat. That is terrible. I didn't even get that.
That sucks.
That did not translate. That was bad. Ew. Yeah. It's just bad story. So in my head, though, here's what I think. And I'm not trying to knock I'm knocking Brad Bird because fuck Brad Bird. But also palling around with John Lasseter. So it kind of makes sense.
We've already talked about.
Yeah. So it kind of makes sense that, like, this person would think these things and exist in this world.
Long history together. Not surprised. Not surprised
at all. Y'all. Problematic white men. Let's talk about it.
So,
but my idea, again, this is just theorizing, but to me, I'm like, because this is a huge team effort. Creating this thing takes so many people and so much time to create, and so many ideas kind of bouncing off of each other. Part of me thinks that some of the initial writers, or possibly even sort of the story by writers who, or punch up, like anybody who was a part of that process, possibly pitched the idea of talking about racial injustice and talking about systemic inequality and talking about these things. And they were pitched and they're like, hey, what if this storyline, we talk about this? How cool would that be? And then it ties into this. And again, same with the queer thing. Like, we'll talk about the queer community in it too. We'll talk about all of these different groups, because if we're talking about the word special and what special means in this way that is so vague, let's be better than what we did in the first movie and change that and say that special and powers can mean so many different things. And in this way and in this world, everything is so vastly different. And there is injustice that isn't just petty theft. There's injustice in a system that rewards white skin. Like, let's talk about these things. Part of me thinks that these ideas were put out on the table and Brad Bird said, nah.
Oh, for sure. You know why? Because he didn't see himself in those ideas. When you have like a whole character set like that's based on his real life, his family, because I think he did sell insurance at one point or something like this. Like, Mr. Incredible is him, right? Yeah. Or is who he thinks he sees himself as, which is also fucked because he sees himself as a shitty person without and has lots of pity for himself.
Yeah, but not to him. He's not shitty to himself.
Nope. He thinks he's the coolest shit. But yeah, so he didn't see himself in those characters, therefore he did not see any value in those characters. But he's like, cool, if you want to add them, great, but we're not going to. We didn't get to do the baby thing in the last movie, so that's going to take up 10 minutes in this one that, they could have just released that as a short in between. And that would have been cool, right?
Yeah,
I as a little teaser. I mean, they do all that stuff and I love that. But that 10 minutes could have been taken up by fleshing out some of these characters or talking about these other heroes. And, you know, you could even talk about the wealth and influence in relation to access to life-saving technology and things like that. Cause we still haven't even gotten into the screenslaver, right?
Oh my God.
And her whole thing.
Talk about class privilege.
Exactly.
Talk about class privilege.
And her whole thing was, well, supers shouldn't be around because if my dad didn't have faith in them or didn't believe in them, then he would have gone to his panic room and been fine. But also, if you have a panic room, okay, sure, great. But who the fuck has a panic room that's watching this movie? Who the fuck can afford that? If you're
rich and white.
Like, for all of this person's money and all of their influence, they couldn't save their own life because it's really frustrating. And so instead of putting blame or not blame, but actually seeing it for what it is, she's just trying to blame the superhero that didn't show up. And so that's literally her whole motivation. And then she has this giant monologue on, you watch talk shows, you eat chips and watch whatever from your couch and blah, blah, blah. And it's this big fucking thing about how everybody's in front of a screen instead of experiencing life, when that's not even her narrative. That's not her core thing, is that her parents died because superheroes weren't around. So why is she spouting off all of this other stuff? And I think that a lot of that was just to color feminism in a more shitty way, to make it look as shitty as possible, right? Because she as the intellectual is bad, and so okay, cool, she's a feminist, and she also hates screens. She also does this. So, but it's so weird to me because the whole time I thought her brother was the bad guy, because that kind of fit his character profile. Is he's a good old boy, he's really clean cut, family values. And she spends her whole life, her whole thing is in front of a screen. That's her whole job, is to program these things and to make all of these things and to do all of these things. And she never once talked about having a problem with any of that. And so that just felt really weird that was her super villain's whole MO. Again, they just didn't know what to do with her, and they didn't know what feminism is. So it's we're just going to put all of these things together. Feminism is just all of this.
It was as misguided as those open the economy boomers yelling and screaming on the Capitol so they can go get their hair done.
Yes.
In that same way, because if we're looking at these characters, her whole vendetta is engulfed in this premise that the only reason her parents are dead are because of the supers. She, as a rich, wealthy white person, has never been inconvenienced and has never been told no, that there is no possible other scenario where
I know, this is so weird because it's so convoluted and so fucked up.
Yeah.
They didn't know what they were saying.
She's never been inconvenienced. So in this world where her parents died because of the supers, there's no possible scenario in her head where she just thinks, well, sometimes things happen. Sometimes accidents happen. Sometimes a stray bullet hits somebody and that person dies. They had nothing to do with it. Their parents had nothing to do with it. It was a robbery. They're not coming in there to kill them. They're coming in there to steal. They happen to be there. Again, not excusing the robbery and the murder, but in her head, because she's so important and wealthy and everything has to do with them and their family, she cannot even convince herself that the possibility that they were just a bystander and that it had nothing to do with them is even on the table, right?
Right.
Because the whole vendetta, it's the superhero's fault. Somebody has to pay for this because this. Somebody has to pay for this. What a rich fucking phrase. Well, you're out of fettuccine, someone's gonna pay for that. It's I've been inconvenienced. It's somebody's fault. And that person, because I'm used to getting what I want, I'm used to being told yes, because of that inconvenience, somebody has to pay for this thing.
Well, and it's not even just taking it out on the one person, on the one superhero that didn't answer the call, right? Or it's not. Instead, she's just trying to take on everybody, and that's what a lot of people think about feminism. A lot of misguided people, is that you're mad at all men, that you hate all men, and even if we say dude, men suck. It's. I
mean, to some degree, yeah, I get let's say it. Yeah,
for sure.
I mean,
for sure.
It's true.
She sucks, but
no.
But
she sucks.
She does, but she did have a couple of good points, and it sucks because they can't even write a bad character good.
But it goes back to because again with Syndrome and Evelyn, underneath some of their weird takes, a lot of the points that they were making were okay, sure, yeah, kinda, I'm kind of on the side. It kind of it just plays to this idea of what So the content creators, the people who made this movie, the director, the writer, what do you think is bad? Like, where is your value system coming into play here? Where like your villain in the first one was like an equity champion and you're like, that's bad, destroy it. Cool. What do you guys think about that? Like, tell us more. Talk to us. Like, really? That's your bad guy? Your bad guy is somebody who wants everybody to be on an even playing field? Like, truly, it makes me empathize with the fucking villain. Like, your villain, the person you're writing, like, which makes me reassess, like, well, who's the actual villain in this movie? The white supremacists who are trying to uphold their privilege, or the guy who wants everybody to have an equal playing field?
But to make sure that you knew he was the villain, they slipped in that line of he sells weapons to all sorts of bad guys, right? He's a weapons dealer, and that's how he got all of his money. So just to make sure that you didn't sympathize with him, or that like that was like the first thing out of his mouth before he started saying the rest of his plan. It was, I got to where I am because this is what I want to do with that.
Which,
so
right,
you
so
already made up your how you felt about him in your mind.
Yeah. In this way, you're telling us murder's bad, which cool, we get, we're on board. So the equivalence of like him being a bad person is tied to the fact that he sells arms to unknown people, those arms probably ending lives. At the same time, our hero family is also killing people. So at what point do we draw the line on like murder being the bad thing, despite no matter what, like the compass of compassion, the justice meter that is here is so fucking skewed and off. Like, what is just and what is unjust in this world? You guys are saying it's clear cut, but you're developing all of these storylines that convolute the message of everything. Like, either get better values or be better writers, because one of those is bad, if not both of those are bad.
Y'all need to get good, okay? You writers need to get good.
And again,
it's
not to knock
hard.
everybody who worked on it, because I'm sure that there were some like actually good voices in some of those rooms, but
well, and I'm sure that that's why we got some of the moments that we really liked in, in both of these films. But like, it does take so many people to create this. But at the same time, especially when you have one person that's like yay or nay, or that has, and especially like, Disney has such a hold on, and Pixar have such a hold on these properties where they get veto decision on all this other stuff. And it's so curated. And I feel like this is maybe a movie where there was just so many ideas and so many different perspectives and so many where nobody was agreeing. And so they like just kind of strung it together as best as they could. This was not as messy as Rise of Skywalker, but but we're getting there.
Yeah.
Oh, I do want to bring up a line that was at the end that I really liked, and I think it's either Violet or somebody. One of the women says it, but when they're putting Ethel. Fucking Evelyn. When they're putting Evelyn away. There's a line that says, I'm sorry, she's rich and she's probably just going to get away with a slap on the wrist or something like that. And I was like, cool. Yeah, you will know.
Okay. Thank you for bringing this up. I was just like, okay, so this movie knows the system is broken. Why aren't we addressing it? Like, again, it's this moment where like you dip your toe into class privilege and a broken system. So, oh my God. Here, okay. Violet literally says that at the end. So this is coming from the creators of this story. Meanwhile, they're trying to do this pro-cop thing. And when the pizza delivery boy gets arrested, he's getting in the cop car and the cop's like, don't blame a broken system or something like that. Like, the system isn't broken, whatever. So which is it? The system's broken or it's not broken? Where do you guys stand? Because it's one or the other.
They flip-flop. They go back and forth and back and forth.
Again, this is the most centrist bullshit I've ever heard. Like, I mean, I guess that makes sense for Disney, right? Just like the centrist queens of the universe not having a fucking opinion. Not
having an opinion, but putting the front like you do have an opinion. And like wanting to be perceived as both family friendly and cutting edge. on the forefront of like representation and all this stuff, wanting to feel like you're there or pretend like you're there with doing the least amount of effort and with actually not doing any of that.
Yep.
That's kind of where they exist and what they excel at. So
fuck them. Fuck this movie. Fuck Brad Bird. Fuck Disney.
Fuck it all.
This sucked.
So we watched The Incredibles and The Incredibles 2. Too bad it exists.
Too bad Bird. Also, this movie was anything but incredible.
Hot take.
More like The Incredulous. Others more. I don't know.
Really reaching.
Yeah, we're trying.
All right, so The Incredibles 2004. Who do you think that was for?
It was for anybody who is nostalgic for the big air quotes simplicity of the 50s and an earlier time, which is coded language for I want to be racist in public. So it's for those people, including Brad Bird, who is one of them.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that it's for Brad Bird. He made the Holy Trinity, his own Holy Trinity in there. The savior, the villain, and the voice of reason. Ugh.
Amen. Disney and Pixarium Deus Disneyranium. I don't know. Whatever.
Did you like it?
When I first saw it, I loved it. Watching it this week, I did not like it. I actually really didn't like it. It was a bad movie. It's a bad story. It's bad characters. For the most part, some of them are cool. Sometimes. Also, comparing the animation and like the shading and everything, it looked rough. It's like going back and watching Toy Story again. You're like, oh my God. Like, they got away with this Windows 95 bullshit. Jesus. Are they okay?
Yeah. Are you okay?
But, leaps and bounds and all that. Did you like it?
The first time I saw it, I was meh about it. And this time, I'm like, if this was a picture book, I would like it. Like, I don't want any words from this movie. I just want some beautiful ass stills of the concept art for this.
I love that.
I love. Everything else was garbage.
Truly. Yeah, you're so right. The concept art for this was probably gorgeous.
I've seen some of it. It's really, really
Is it
pretty.
really good? Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just some like fucking moodscape reds and oranges and
It's something I would absolutely like if it wasn't from this movie. Like, I would love some of that art.
Yeah. The aesthetic was so good. Like, I know we're talking about the first one in this, but even in the second one, when they're at the hotel, like they're in the pool.
Yes. And like the colors of the doors.
It's so emblematic of a very specific type and time of architecture that is so like kind of fun and silly, also low-key problematic, but very cute. All that. So,
second one, number 2. Did you think it was new or interesting, the same, progressive, regressive, and how did it involve with today's ideas?
So I will say that it was exactly the same. Because even though it was trying to be, big air quotes, progressive and inclusive, I think it failed to do everything it was trying to do. So for that reason, I'm going to say it stayed exactly the same. Because it stayed just as stale and just as exclusive as the first.
I'm going to say that it was regressive.
Ooh, okay.
Because I think it's even worse if you try to bring up these ideas and it's like, oh, look, see, I know what's going on. And then don't talk about it and then just actually do and show the opposite of what you're trying to address.
Oh, okay.
So at least the first one was just shitty and contained within that shitty family and incel boy, right? But this other one really opened up the world and still it focused on the wrong parts and the wrong people and the wrong things. And you don't get a cookie for just showing that these other people exist without even talking about them or what they mean or what they represent. You don't get a cookie for showing gender roles are hard and it's hard to be mommy, you know?
But it's also hard to be daddy. And you're like, shush.
Yeah. Like you don't get a cookie for that. And that's gross and that's wild and that's aggressive. And you had such a great opportunity to not do that and to show some real character growth for the entire family and how to have those conversations and stuff rather than just push it off as that's adolescence, you know? So, I think it was incredibly regressive.
Yeah. Which also, that weird little comment, I didn't bring this up earlier, but when he's like, is that adolescence? So adolescence was not the word that I felt like was initially.
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't.
You know what I mean?
I'm sure it wasn't. Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, so that's what's happening here? They're going to. Cool.
The little boy is saying, that's adolescence.
We're going to just love that one. And I'm sure his dad's just like, oh, whatever, ladies. And you're like, shut up, Mr. Incredible.
Yeah, they both suck. Who was it for?
Who was this one for? This one was for self-congratulatory liberals who parade as being inclusive when in fact they're low-key racist and shitty and problematic in every aspect. I'm going to say that.
I feel like this is for people who try to stay relevant by doing the least and pretending they're enlightened. Yeah. And who pretend like they really care about people and about things and about justice and about all of that, but really at the end of the day don't want to have a conversation about it. And this movie was also for cops.
Yeah, this movie was for cops. Oh, God. Fuck cops. Yeah, that's exactly what this was.
So I take it you didn't like it?
No, I actually really didn't like it. It was going to be a big negative for me. I learned something this week. I don't like these movies. I thought I liked these movies, and I don't. I learned that this week.
I thought they were okay, and then I watched them again, and I was like, ooh.
Yeah. Gonna be a big ol' oof. Big yikes. I
take that back. The first time that I watched Incredibles 2, I was like, fuck this, because I was so incredibly mad about what they did with Mr. Incredible and how, because I just really hate it when it's that trope of Mr. Mom and failing at being Mr. Mom. Everything about that genre just pisses me off. In my fucking core. I hate it. I don't like it. And maybe let somebody else write a movie. Pixar?
Yeah. Hire better writers. Hire people of experience of different cultures.
Ugh, man. All right. I think that's it. What do you think?
That's it too.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Sorry this is a long one. We have lots of thoughts and feelings about things. That's why we're doing a podcast, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyways, you can write into us at nostalgiapodcast@gmail.com. Special thanks to David Juicero for tech support, Danny Barkley for editing. You can find us on all of the socials and all of the stuff. We love you. Subscribe, tell your friends, leave a review. And thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Jess.
And remember, stay cute.
And stay critical.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
We did the thing. Okay, bye.